BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello, and thanks for joining us for the Farming Today podcast. I'm Kaz Graham, and in this episode, how Scottish arable farmers have been harvesting in what they call English conditions, and river levels in parts of eastern Scotland are critically low. What will be the impact on farmers there?
Water usage will be restricted in most cases, but in some cases suspended altogether. This is something we don't take lightly. This is the last place that an Environment Protection Agency wants to be.
We'll have more on that a little later. First, though, butterflies are a welcome summer visitor to our gardens, but also to farmers' fields or orchards because of the role that they play in pollination. And we're talking about pollinators all this week on Farming Today. Butterfly numbers have fallen dramatically over the last 50 years. They've dropped by 80% since 1970 due to habitat loss and changes in land management, according to the charity Butterfly Conservation. Now, a project in Wales is using cattle to help restore an important habitat for the rare High Brown Fritillary. Sally Challoner has been to take a look.
I'm standing amongst some bracken on Old Castle Down, which is a lovely open area just outside Bridgend in South Wales. And this is part of a project which is bringing back a very rare and precious butterfly. I'm with Dot Williams, who's from the Butterfly Conservation Wales. What's this project all about?
This particular project here is about the High Brown Fritillary. And the High Brown Fritillary is only found in one place in Wales now. And that's here.
What does it look like? Describe it for us.
Oh, it's about the same size as a red admiral butterfly, which is a common butterfly most people know. And it's beautifully vibrant orange with beautiful black checkerboards on it. It's absolutely gorgeous.
And why save it? Why is it so important to save it?
Well, butterflies are incredibly important indicators of climate change, of environmental change. Butterflies are brilliant pollinators as well.
And this habitat here, as far as the eye can see, there's bracken.
Bracken is an important part of the ecology of this butterfly. At the edges of the bracken, you will see lots of dog violets, common dog violets. And that's the only food plant of the caterpillar. As you know, bracken dies back in the winter and forms bracken litter. So we need a level of litter that the violets can grow through for the caterpillars to feed on, but we need it to create its own little microclimate. So we don't want it 6 to 8 inches deep because that's too deep, and we don't need it at an inch because that's too shallow. So we've got to get it at that right level.
So you need to manage it, don't you? And I think that's where the cattle come in. And we've also got one of the farmers here, because the belted Galloways I can see just over there have been up here grazing.
My name's Luke Morgan. I farm in Southern Down. Yeah, so the animals have been up here about 2 years. We got them on the GPS collars, so one of the first things we did was have to get hold of the collars and get them all set up and get the animals used to them.
They look really happy. They're munching away on the bracken, aren't they?
Yeah, well, hopefully finding the grass around the bracken as well and trampling a lot of it and you letting it get smothered out. But I think if we had more in the future, I'd be able to make a much bigger difference.
I'm Mary Morgan. I'm Secretary of Ogmore Commoners Association. In the beginning, there was opposition because we didn't think it was practical to be able to graze cattle on the common. But then once the no-fence grazing opportunity arose...
You mean with the collars, keeping them in, yeah?
So the GPS system, the graziers, some of the younger graziers thought it would be viable and they were interested in having a go at it.
Well, as well as the cattle who are doing good work up here, there's also a team of volunteers. And I'm here with Richard Smith.
In the old days when people cut bracken for bedding, it was naturally kind of rotated and managed. We also do some cutting using mechanical tools and hand tools, particularly where there's scrub coming in with the bracken as well. And we monitor the butterfly activity each summer so we can see which bits they're using and try and maintain those in really good condition.
Do you ever get to see the High Brown Fritillary butterfly when you're working?
Funny you should say that, because for the first time this year we were working still on the 26th of May and the earliest ever High Brown Fritillary came and joined us, and it just sat there and posed for us. And that is literally the earliest ever.
Oh, wow. Fantastic. That report from Sally Challoner. Well, butterflies have been thriving this summer. They've been helped by the dry spring and the hot, dry weather over summer. And as we've reported on the programme, that weather has had an impact on this year's harvest. In England, farmers were out with their combines earlier than they have been for the last 19 years, since records began, according to the AHDB, although lower yields and falling grain prices are putting something of a dampener on the joys of getting harvest in early. In Scotland, farmers have also been harvesting cereals earlier than usual in what are being described as English conditions. Agronomists are warning that shifting weather patterns mean farmers will need to adopt a different mindset. I asked Donald Patterson from the farmer-owned co-op Scottish Agronomy what that meant. But first, he gave me a quick update on how the arable harvest in Scotland is progressing.
So I think for us this year, it was an earlier start to harvest than normal. So combines got going kind of mid-July. And then it's been a really good spell since then, so a lot of people are nearly finished or already finished, which is unusual for us. So yeah, it is just generally a much earlier harvest than normal.
And how's it looking in terms of things like yield and quality?
So yields, certainly for winter crops, so like winter barley, winter wheat, have been generally quite good. Oilseed rape was exceptional this year for a lot of people. It did really well. Spring crops, so your spring barley, spring oats, have been more mixed, both in terms of yield and quality. But yeah, in general, I'd say harvest has gone pretty well for most people.
I was interested that you described the weather conditions that Scotland has had this year as English conditions. What do you mean by that?
With the changing climate, warmer weathers, we're tending to see milder winters where crops are getting away more. We're tending to see an earlier finish to harvest, such as we've had now. Often we wouldn't be finished combining until mid to late September here, so we are kind of seeing conditions that would maybe more commonly have been seen in southern England, and equally, for guys further down south, they're maybe seeing conditions that are maybe more common in, well, what used to be more common in Central or Southern Europe. So it is just how the climate is changing and how we have to kind of adapt to that.
You say that farmers need to change their mindset. What do you mean by that?
I think, we're definitely seeing more variable weather conditions year on year. So I think it is just trying to be prepared for that where possible and be flexible and adjusting plans from year to year. Last year for us was a very wet year, so we didn't really get a chance. It was a very short gap between harvest and sowing. Whereas this year we have a bigger window at this time of year before we're sowing the next crop. So it is just trying to take that opportunity to maybe help improve soil structure or establish cover crops or things like that. If there are different pest pressures, if there are increasing aphid numbers, potentially looking at different control measures for that kind of thing, or control grass weeds, just to try and be as prepared as we can for whatever next year brings, basically.
We've heard that there are now 3 areas in the east of Scotland where water is significantly scarce. We've heard that from the Scottish Environment Protection Agency. What do you think the implications of that are for the farmers there?
Yeah, so this is a thing that's just come into force. So for those growing high value crops such as potatoes or vegetable crops, having a limitation on the irrigation is a big issue. Fingers crossed there's a little bit of rain forecast for this week, which will hopefully maybe help the situation a small bit. And this is becoming an issue more and more frequently. So again, water management for those growing high value crops is becoming an increasing issue.
And will agronomists like yourself be involved in working out new strategies specifically for dealing with this scarcity that we've heard about at the moment?
We do a lot of work with potato farmers, certainly. And maybe it's adjusting which varieties go in which field according to water availability, or maybe focusing the irrigation on specific fields rather than on all of the area if you can't get round it all quick enough. So water management is important. I mean, last year, ironically, there was so much water it was trying to reduce flooding in some of the fields, which was the bigger issue. But this year it's completely switched round to kind of water management in terms of getting adequate water on these crops. So it is something that we increasingly have to be aware of.
Donald Patterson. And as I mentioned to Donald, 3 river catchments in the east of Scotland are now in a state of significant scarcity. That is the most extreme level of water shortage issued by SEPA, the Scottish Environment Protection Agency. It says the River Deveron in Aberdeenshire is at its lowest level since the 1970s. And that unless there's significant rainfall, other rivers, including the Lower Tweed and the Don, could also fall into that highest drought alert category. Well, farmers and other businesses are being restricted from abstracting or removing water from the affected catchments, and producers of brassicas, potatoes and other crops will have their fingers firmly crossed for some rainfall. David Harley is SEPA's head of water and planning.
After a very dry summer and following a very dry winter, we're really at the situation now where water levels are at such a low level and for such a sustained length of time that we need to put in restrictions in terms of abstractions from the water environment in certain parts of the country to ensure that the environment is protected, to ensure that the water ecology is protected.
I mean, there's big regional differences, aren't there? There's been water, rain in the west, fantastic grass growth for farmers in the west, but that's not the story in the east of Scotland, is it?
Very much so, and that's why we get a lot of our arable farming in the east of Scotland, because the weather conditions are usually favourable. But those extremes are going to be exaggerated or accentuated in the years ahead as the impacts of climate change come upon us.
And there has been some heavy rain in recent weeks, I think even in the east, but not enough to allow the rivers to recover.
No, not enough, unfortunately. We keep a daily track on river levels, and you do see a reaction from this rain. But the main problem is that the groundwater levels are very low. And the groundwater is the kind of the bank, that's the storage which keeps our base flow in the rivers up. So we really need that groundwater to be replenished, and that takes sustained rain.
How unusual is this? Is this something that you do normally see at this time of year, or is this really notable?
Well, unfortunately, this is becoming more regular. Over the last 5 years, we've been in that situation 2 or 3 times. But prior to that, it was an entirely novel situation. So that's really just showing the impacts of climate change, where sustained, warm, dry periods are going to be more common. That's where we need to be thinking about the long-term reaction to this and how we organise ourselves as water users across society.
You've put some restrictions in over particular catchments in eastern Scotland. What are the implications for farmers who need to irrigate crops there? Because it's a big potato grower, there's a lot of soft fruit growing there.
The implications are that water usage will be restricted in most cases, but in some cases suspended altogether, depending on the water environment that's affected. This is something we don't take lightly. This is the last place that an Environment Protection Agency wants to be. But we've been working with farmers throughout the summer since May, advising about the likelihood of this and helping them with short-term actions they can take and really keeping them informed. We've made something like 600 phone calls over the last few months working with farmers. In terms of crop type, there'll be an early harvest for some of those root vegetables which are more resistant, and therefore there's less of a need for water there. But I think the worrying crops are the brassicas, which do need a fairly consistent supply of water at this point in time.
And you say you've been talking to farmers. What advice can you give them?
Well, advice depends on the crop, depends on the site, depends on the type of kit that the farmer uses. But we're really helping farmers with short-term actions they can do, like making sure that there's no leakages, making sure their kit is in good condition. Also thinking about how they could possibly share the allocation, the licensed allocation with neighbours. That's something that we feel could be used much more. And then looking really to the future, thinking about alternative sources of water, such as groundwater, or even moving towards offline storage, which collects water during the winter for use then during the summer.
This is something that we talk about in England quite a lot, but people will be thinking, Scotland, it rains a lot. Do farmers really need to be investing in this kind of thing?
Yes, they do, and I'm afraid all the statistics and the evidence points towards this being a more likely situation going forward. So all as a society need to think differently about how we use water and where we get our water from.
That's David Harley from SEPA, and that's all we've got time for this morning. I'm Kaz Graham, the producer is Rebecca Rooney, and Farming Today is a BBC Audio Bristol production.